Hello, this is Bruce Morton, and welcome to Cancer Interviews. Today's guest is Karla Chavez from Siguatepeque, Honduras, and she's going to tell us how she survived stage 2 keratinizing squamous cell carcinoma. That's a form of cervical cancer. So now let's get to it. Karla, and bienvenida a las entrevistas de cáncer. Welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Gracias, Bruce. Thank you.
The very first thing we want to do when we start is to find out a little bit more about you, exclusive of your cancer journey. So, Karla, if you would tell us a bit about where you're from, what you do for work, and when time allows for fun, what you do for fun.
Well, I'm from Honduras. I'm from Siguatepeque, right smack in the center of the country. I'm a civil engineer, so I get to do a lot of work on site and here in my hometown. Luckily, I'm very close to my job. And for fun, I crochet. That's my hobby. I do amigurumis. But I also like to see my family. I spend a lot of time with my family. I visit. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, so I get to spend a lot of time with them.
Now, we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools to help you through your personal cancer journey. But first, we'd like to invite you to give us a like, leave a comment below, and share this story with your friends. And kindly click on the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so you'll be notified the next time we put out an interview. And if you or a loved one are facing a cancer diagnosis, please click on the link in the description and show notes below to check out our free guide, The Top 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I First Got Cancer. Now, Karla, for everybody in their cancer journey, unfortunately, there's a starting point. There's a juncture in which you notice something was abnormal, something wasn't quite right. And if you would, take us back to the very beginning of when, unfortunately, things started to go wrong.
Well, it started in mid-2016. I was trying to be healthy, getting, into a diet, trying to be a better self because I was going to a friend's wedding and I wanted to look good. So I started noticing that I couldn't put down the weight and that I started gaining weight. So I went to a doctor and they found a lump in my throat. When the doctor found out that, he says, Karla, this doesn't look good. I want to check this out. So let's go out and have a biopsy done on my lump. It came out clear that there was nothing wrong with it, but he still wasn't happy with it. So he said, Karla, let's do a surgery. I want to take it out. I want to see what's there. And it came out to be thyroid cancer, which was, I don't know, I wasn't expecting that. And I find that diagnosis was kind of easy for me because it was like past tense. I already got it out, so I'm okay with that. I was sent to an oncologist, and he started saying, well, we have thyroid cancer. Let's prep you for radioactive iodine. But before that, I want to run tests just to make sure that you're okay to receive this treatment. That was starting of January 2017. I had scheduled all the appointments, my dentist appointments, heart, everything, CAT tests. But I decided to leave for last my gynecologic testing. When I went to the gynecologist, I was bleeding when she was doing her test. Says, Karla, this doesn't look good. I want you to come back in a week, and I want to do a biopsy. And 2 days later, she called me to her office. And she said, Karla, I'm sorry to say, you have cancer. And I actually don't remember much of that, anything that went through in that conversation. I was lucky to have my mom with me. But all I could think about in that moment is like, I just came out of thyroid cancer. What do you mean I have cervical cancer? And they're both unrelated in this moment. And I was pretty scared because I didn't have symptoms. When she asked me, did you ever feel anything different? Like, no, actually, my life's been pretty normal, except for the weight gain that we knew was due to my thyroid being underactive, but never expected another diagnosis. But I never went to a gynecologist. Well, I hadn't gone to a gynecologist in a very long while. due to that, I travel a lot. So when I went to my oncologist with the results, he checked me out, and I was staged in 2B. He still says, you know what, Carla, I want you to go to another doctor to get I want him to check this out to make sure that we're all on the same page. And he called him up right there and then. And the doctor saw me an hour later. I was still numb. I mean, I knew I had cancer, but I was still like, maybe I'll just get surgery. I mean, I didn't think anything of chemo, radiation, or anything. So when I went to the other doctor, he's like, yes, you're staged 2B. We need to start chemo as soon as possible. And I was like, what about my fertility? How is this going to affect my life? So I started just asking questions. He says, it's very aggressive, and I'm sorry, we won't be able to preserve fertility. We need to begin chemo and radiation. That was the last week of February in 2017. By March, the second week of March of that same year, I was sitting down for my first chemo, and which was pretty tough. Mostly because I knew what was going on now, and I understood that I wasn't going to be able to have children, that my life was going to change, that I never thought I was going to die. I know this is kind of weird, but all I could think about was like, oh man, I have to go through this, and I really like my job. I'm in a fairly new relationship, and how is this going to affect what's going to happen next, right? So I was very worried of what my next steps, and that's because I'm a control freak. I like everything to be like jotted down, make sure I have a plan for everything and how I'm going to do everything. And this time there's no control over it. I had to depend on my doctors. I had to depend on everything that was going to go and happen, right? And it was beyond anything I could imagine. I went through 8 chemotherapy sessions. Oh, sorry, you're going to ask? Okay.
Well, the first thing I want to ask you, because you're about to talk about chemo, and I was going to ask about that. So we will get back to chemo right after I ask you this question. But
okay,
if you would, describe keratinizing squamous cell carcinoma and how it feels when you have that. Are you in pain? Does it affect you in any other way?
Like I said, I had no symptoms that I could come and tell you it felt like this, or I know I've talked to other cervical cancer survivors, and they've said that there's been pain when they've had sexual intercourse or bleeding or different, but actually I had no symptoms. I can't tell you, yes, this is what I felt. It was actually a normal day to day for me, normal period. If I would bleed during sexual intercourse, it would normally, like, I would brush it off because my period came very, like, a couple of days later or a day later, so I didn't think that was a symptom of it until, well, the doctor said, yes, that bleeding away from the days of your period is a symptom of this type of cervical cancer. But I had no pain. Like I said, I had no symptoms that I could, like, recognize in the moment.
Now let's get to the chemo, which I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that was probably the toughest part of the treatment. What was the toughest part of chemo for you?
Well, actually, chemo was tough, but I think there's other aspects later on that I will talk to you about that were a bit harder for me. The toughest part of chemo was knowing that once I started the treatment, I would lose fertility. The doctor said I did 8 rounds of chemo in conjunction with radiation therapy, external radiation. So they said, once we start radiating, Carla, it's over. You're not going to be able to have children. Your fertility is gone. And they were very blunt about it. They were very clear on what was going to happen to me. So I guess the biggest aspect was my mental state. I was not prepared for that news. I was 34. So I was like, really, I still had so many plans. And that was, I guess the mental part of it. My mental health suffered very much.
How about support? I think you had mentioned your mom, who I'm guessing was very much a part of this equation in terms of the support.
Yes.
But what other individuals provided support for you?
During this stage, I was very open about my diagnosis and what I was going through on social media. So I had a lot of friends that were a lot of support that I can't say enough. Just a message saying, how you doing? I'm rooting for you. We're praying. Those are a lot of help. But my family is, if not the biggest support I've had. I have my brothers, my grandma, my dad, and telling them was kind of the hardest thing to say, to tell them that I had cancer again and that I had to go through a different process. But their support, they're like, we don't care what type of cancer. The stigma around cervical cancer in my country, at least, there's a lot of taboo when we talk about it. But knowing that I have their support, they just said, okay, you have cervical cancer. We don't care. We're going to beat this. We're going to do it together. And I can't say enough. I had their support. My boyfriend also, he was the biggest part of support. He was with me during chemotherapy, during the surgeries and everything that went and continues to go on after that.
Did you suffer much in the way of fatigue?
Well, yes, a lot. First chemo, I tell everyone my first chemo was like getting back from a very bad drinking, a binge drinking or something, because it was like a hangover. I felt my body was just not there. I got out of chemo. I said, I'm strong enough. I'm just going to go walk and everything. And because I wanted to be active, I didn't want to feel like sluggish. But no, I slept 3 days. I was woken up by my boyfriend or my mom. Karla, you need to go to radiation. Come on, you have to get up. And they would wake me up. And I would go to radiation and I'd just go back to bed. It was very hard the first couple of weeks.
What was it like to eat? And I ask that because many of our guests who have gone through chemo talk about how food tastes like metal. And just eating, which should be fun, suddenly isn't fun. What was it like just to, eat and drink?
Food is so important in my life. We have a lot of food here. I couldn't eat. I was very lucky that they tailored like an eating plan for me, so I was eating very healthy, and I couldn't jug milk. I still can't drink milk. From that time, it would just go. My stomach would go berserk, but meats were a hard pass because I would get bowel obstructions during the process. I miss meat a lot. I do eat meat occasionally, but meat is something that still continues to affect me. But the metal taste happened to me around, I would say, the third chemotherapy, and everything just shifted. I didn't want to eat anything. I didn't want to try anything because the taste was so, drinking water was a horrible experience because it's tasted like that metal taste of, I guess, all the drugs that are pushed into you.
Karla, the following is sort of a double standard because I think this is tougher for women than for men, but a lot of times part of the equation with chemo is hair loss. Did you experience hair loss? And if so, how did you deal with it?
I actually didn't. I experienced very minimum hair loss, which was curious because my doctor was like, what do you eat? Why isn't it? Because they were expecting it to come out. And I actually had very long hair. I cut it off because I said, if I'm going to experience hair loss, at least I have like, a little shortcut. And it was funny because my boyfriend, he's a metalhead. He had long hair. He cut it off. My brother cut it off. Everyone cuts it off. And it's like, you didn't lose your hair. And I'm like, sorry. But I did use a lot of shampoos that were plant-based. I was sent by a friend, a lot of shea butter, so I could do a lot of massages in my head and everything. But my hair loss was very minimal. It was little, not much.
Another part of chemo, and I'm guessing that this would affect you because you sound like a sharp cookie who's on top of things, and you like to be in control and that sort of thing. But another term that we hear from people who undergo chemo is the term chemo brain. Did you experience chemo brain in which cognitive functions were not what they used to be?
Yes, that I think is like the hardest part. During my chemotherapy, I wanted to continue working. So I would like go on my computer every time I felt I could and answer emails. I already had a support team at work. They were helping me like get through the things that I wasn't being able to do. But I would make so many mistakes, and in my line of career, that's not a good plan. So I just had to tell them, you know what, I have to stop. I don't remember. I know what I'm doing, but my headspace isn't moving in that direction. It's just like I forget things, and when I do remember, I already sent the email. So I had a lot of issues, and I started making lists. That's how I worked through it.
Our guest is Karla Chavez from Siguatepeque, Honduras, and she's telling us about how she survived stage 2 keratinizing squamous cell carcinoma. Now, Karla, with any of these quote-unquote below-the-belt cancers, there are implications that maybe other cancer sufferers don't have to deal with. So I want to ask you about two areas that are two lines of questioning that are very sensitive, but for women who are watching this and they've just been diagnosed, or they're they're in a position in which they might be diagnosed, this information will be very important. But first of all, just in terms of below the belt, having to dispose of urine or waste. What happened to you as far as that's concerned?
Okay. I know these are like topics that it's very hard to talk about sometimes because it's giving it everything that goes on in your body. Radiation is tough, and I went through hell, and that's what I was telling you before that. After chemotherapy and radiation, the side effects after it, I think were the most difficult, and it has to do with my bowel functions, I have a colostomy, which I'll explain why. After my chemo and radiation, 45 days later, I had a full hysterectomy. And my doctor said, Karla, you can go back to work in 30 days. I went back to work in 24. I wanted to be on top of things, but I don't think it was even 40 days after that surgery, I developed a rectovaginal fistula. That is a tear. Well, my vaginal cuff was, due to radiation, was fixed with my colon. So a tear was made between both areas. And what the symptoms I noticed was I was in a lot of pain. I felt pain inside. I thought maybe it's because of the surgery or anything. But then I started to notice that when I went to the bathroom, my urine came out very brown or darkish red. I thought I was bleeding, so I got very scared. And what I did is I took a picture of it and sent it to my doctor. There's something here that I don't like. And he was very like, Karla, smell it. How does it smell? It doesn't smell. I didn't find any weird smell. So I told him that I wanted to go in. He said, come in. Please come in. Let's check this out. We checked it out, and he did an exam, a pelvic exam, and noticed a tear about a centimeter diameter. And he says, Karla, you have a rectovaginal fistula. I need you to go to an oncology surgeon so he can assess it better. We went, and that was in August 2017. I went at the end of that same month, and the tear was already 2.3 centimeters wide. So the first thing was testing through that. That was horrible. They told me I had to use diapers. I didn't want to use diapers because I just didn't want to use diapers. It was something I said, I'm not doing that. But I did have to use maxi pads, and it was like a big punch in the gut because I'm not getting my period, but I'm using maxi pads to control all this fluid that is coming out that I can't control. So that was kind of a very hard part of my life was after that. Once getting the rectovaginal fistula and 3 months of living through that while I was getting tested and being prepped for surgery was very hard.
Managing a colostomy bag is not an easy thing to do. How tough was that? Did you get much in the way of assistance? And it sounds like you've been doing this for a while. So is it easier to manage now?
Getting a colostomy bag was very tough because I didn't know what a colostomy bag was. So that was like the doctor, when he explained it to me, I understood. I went online, which was a very big mistake because Google doctor is not a good doctor. You have to look for more reputable sources to be able to understand. But when I did finally get my colostomy bag, I was in awe that I had no more pain in the area where my fistula was because I wasn't getting infections anymore and feces were not, flowing through it. So 2 days later, even though I was high on drugs, Dr. Drugs, it was easy. Health-wise, we don't have ostomy nurses in Honduras. So my doctor had to teach me how to put on and take off my ostomy bag while I was still in the hospital. My boyfriend and my mom helped me the first times. A family nurse came over to help me another time. But I said, I have to do this by myself. I mean, they're not going to be here all the time. So it was a trial and error. I started learning how I needed to fit. I had so many leaks at the beginning. I was allergic to the ostomy bags that are available in Honduras. My skin did not like them. And I started going online and looking for, different companies that sell ostomy bags. And I finally found a fit like 6 months after my ostomy. And I still get leaks every now and then, but it's been easier to handle.
Did there come a time with in the post chemo days, and now you've established that you can maintain your own colostomy bag? Did there come a time in which you felt that you were turning the corner and you were to some degree getting back to normalcy?
I would say yes and no. Yes, there was a moment when I started coming back to work. I started coming to work 1 day a week, then 2 times a week, then I started coming 5 days a week. So that would be like, okay, I'm going back into the rhythm, right? But now I do things differently. My day-to-day changed. So I have to take my pills in the morning to help out with my thyroid functions. My diet changes, and everything I do is normally tailored around how I'm doing with my radiated insides, because sometimes food is bad for me. There's food that I normally eat every day, and then on the second time, it just does a whole different thing in my body. So I think my life's changes. I have to be more precautious of how I travel. I travel what I call my diaper bag because I have to have everything for my ostomy. Now I have an extra change of clothes in my car, so which is not normal for everyone else, but for me, it's something that is normal now.
We had talked about support earlier, and you mentioned your mom, your family, your boyfriend. But I want to ask you about an organization that is there to support people who are going through cervical cancer, and that's survivor.org. How did you discover survivor.org, and to what degree has it been a source of support for you?
Well, I discovered Survivor in 2017, right after my hysterectomy. I was in bed. Everyone was working. I was alone, and I had my cell phone with me. I'm like, I need to find someone to talk to or someone that understands. So I started putting on Google hysterectomy, cervical cancer survivors, and survivor.org just popped up in my search. And I went on, and I started reading what the mission and everything that Survivor is. And it said stories. And I just started going through them. And this isn't my trick. I started going through them and I said, holy cow, I'm not alone. I mean, I have no one to talk to here in Honduras about this because nobody talks about below the belt cancers. And these women are just putting it all out there, putting these things that are sometimes so delicate to talk about, and they're speaking about it and how their lives have changed. So I said, I'm going to share my story here too. So I went on and shared my story. I got in contact with several partners of Survivor.org, and I started sharing on my media, my social media, sharing their content, looking through their content. I've been learning so much through it that I was so lucky to assist a survivor school in 2019 that was in Chicago, which was an experience because I got to actually meet them and talk to them. And it just like pushed up my advocacy goal. I wanted to tell everyone about what happened to me because I don't want this to happen to anyone else. And I'm still part of Survivor. I'm a very proud part of Survivor because I get to talk about something that is so important for me, that is ending cervical cancer. And all the information that has been giving on to me, the education that has been giving on to me has been amazing. So I would totally recommend, if you don't feel safe in sharing your story, there are organizations out there, and for me, it has been Survivor.
And now's a good time to share the address and its spelling. It's survivor.org, but it's spelled CERVIVOR.org. CERVIVOR.org. That's survivor.org. And survivor.org can do a number of things to rally to the support of women who have been diagnosed with cervical cancer. I want to close now, Karla, and we always close in the same way, and that is to ask you to put yourself in a position in which you might have a face-to-face, one-on-one interaction with a woman who's been diagnosed with cervical cancer. And by way of a message, there might be many things that you would want to say to this woman, but if you can think of one thing that stands out above all others, what would the number one thing be that you would want to impart to this woman who's just been diagnosed with cervical cancer?
You're not alone. You have a community that will help you out and advocate for yourself. If there's something that you feel that is wrong, just say it to your doctors. Doctors do listen. If you're just, pushing into it. So you're not alone. That would be my take.
Wonderful. And we want to give that survivor.org address one more time. That's Survivor, CERVIVOR.org. Karla Chavez of Siguatepeque, Honduras, muchas gracias por su información y su historia. Thanks so much for telling us all about your story and how you are forging ahead as you address your present and your future. Karla, thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Bruce.
And we want to remind you, just as Karla said, that if you are on a cancer journey or a loved one is on a cancer journey, you are not alone. There are people, there are resources that are out there to help you. So until next time, we'll say thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you on down the road. Just a second here.